All right. So thank you for your patience as we work to get everything set up there. Looks like we are ready to go ahead and start. So thank you so much. So that being said, let me go ahead and greet you all. So hello, everyone. My name is Sean. I'm a faculty librarian here at GCC. And on behalf of myself and the Etcher GCC Libraries Events Committee, I'd like to thank everybody for attending today. And so our discussion today is going to be AI, ChatGPT, and the future of education. And now for faculty and staff, we also intend on having additional conversations we're working on with the CTLE during the week of accountability that we're coordinating with them. However, we wanted to begin this initial conversation also including students so that we can get their kind of valuable perspective as we kind of wrestle with some of these important issues and topics. Now, in regards to the topics, like I mentioned before, we're going to be talking about ChatGPT, AI, and the future of education. And as a child of the 1980s, I've seen my share of different technological innovations from the personal computer to the internet, social media, the Nintendo, which I was really excited about when it came out as a kid. But with ChatGPT and some of these new wave of AI technologies, one of the things that's really kind of surprised me is how quickly they've really risen in prominence and how much excitement they've stirred and also how much anxiety and dread they've also seemed to conjure up as well. So now these AI innovations include systems like Midjourney, which is able to create images and pictures just based on user prompts. Technologies like ChatGPT, which we're going to really focus on today, that can do complex text responses, and a lot of other AI technologies that have been doing things that just a few mere months ago only human minds seemed capable of doing. And that where perhaps these technologies can be potentially as transformative as the area of education. So lots of interesting questions coming up. What are some of the pitfalls and promises of these technologies? What are some of the important issues to be addressed? And how will AI transform education? So to this end, all these are excellent questions, and I brought an esteemed group of colleagues to help answer them. And to begin, I'd like to give the panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves. So if you can tell us your names, maybe a little bit about yourselves, and what, if any, experience do you have with chat?
Stay sharp and identify some of the trends in languages and database systems.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alec Arcara. I work at the Consumer Sciences and Technology Department as an engineering lab technician. I am also an electrical engineering student here at Glendale Community College. My experience with ChatGPT, it's been about 3 months since I've discovered the technology. And at first, I just used it to mess around, like summarize stuff. And then once I found out it was what's called a large language model, which can essentially understand many different languages, excluding English. I'm also the president of GPT to actually code C++ for us, and it did a tremendous job at it. But I have more experience with ChatGPT that we can get into later with the panel, but thank you for having me.
Hey, good morning, Heather Merrill, teacher education. I've been teaching for a while now, back when ditto machines and film strips that probably weren't even around, that you probably are not even familiar with. I've been playing with ChatGPT for not a little while, a couple of weeks now, and just really paying attention to how it's impacting higher ed. Social sciences had a good debate about how we were going to use it, but also in K-12 and how K-12 educators are beginning to see the tool, use the tool, and try to wrap their brains around what the future might look like.
And I am Alisa Cooper. I teach English, literature, journalism, and I've been playing around with ChatGPT since a month after it came out. I had a faculty member on the e-courses committee who was really freaked out about ChatGPT and the power of it. So of course I jumped in to see what it was all about, and I've just been fascinated with it. And so I've been trying all kinds of different experiments with it and looking at it from a different perspective of, oh my God, they're all going to cheat.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for being on the panel today. Now, in addition to the folks on the panel and myself as host, we also have from the library Christina Bell with us in person, who's going to be helping with in-audience questions, Elizabeth Saliba and Jackie, who are assisting with some of the online questions, and then also Keneen, Karen, Michelle, Pam, and Saber from the library help with some of the planning and marketing, and also, of course, Sandy, Catherine, Mike, Victor, and our wonderful IT staff for getting all this stuff set up for that. Now, as far as the format for today's discussion, I'll begin with a couple of questions to our panelists, then we'll move on to questions from and comments from you, the audience, both online and in person here. Yet before doing so, I wanted to ask our resident CIS expert, Phil Stewart, to give us a short introduction to ChatGPT to better inform our discussions and questions going forward. So Phil, if you want, you can take it away. And let me share my screen here. Should be good to go.
I'm glad you did that, Sony. All right, thank you. What I'd like to do is just really give a brief 5 to 7 minute demonstration of what ChatGPT is and what it actually can do for you. Some of the early examples that I'll show actually might be examples that a student would use to help supplement education and learning information. So I'm going to go ahead and gravitate to my notes here for a little bit. So as I started to try and get ready for today's presentation, I thought the best way I could do a deeper dive into ChatGPT was to actually ask ChatGPT what it was all about and then use the tool to learn about the tool. So as I signed into my ChatGPT account, I'm presented with a message box in the bottom. And I can type in my query, typing counts. And very quickly, I get a response. So I can go through it and wade through the narrative and see, what I want to learn and start to form other queries. To me, ChatGPT is a bit of a different research instrument because I grew up in the days of 1990s internet where I would use Archie to search for files and search for basic information. And then I was blessed with the ability to start to use other services in the way of Alta Vista from digital, where I could put in keyword searches, and there were spin-off products called Jeeves. And then eventually Yahoo bought out the technology Alta Vista and came up with queries so I could put in a keyword and get a category that would serve as a way of doing some brainstorming to do a deeper dive. And then Google came along and obliterated the landscape of what search was all about and gave us the search that we have today. Searches to me became rich as compared to the early days because I could start to type in several keywords and get a response. As a technologist and a user of technology, I didn't want to use keywords, but I wanted to type in phrases to get information about what it was that I was interested in. With ChatGPT, I'm doing exactly that, such as with my first inquiry. But ChatGPT goes a little bit deeper because now I have this topic of ChatGPT. I can now start to do a deeper inquiry to gain further insight into this topic. So maybe I want to find more information about ChatGPT by looking at an essay. And you notice as I'm asking for writing an essay, I'm prompted, what do I want it about? Well, ChatGPT. And I get a very long narrative and, unfortunately, Sean, I'm going to take the next 20 minutes to actually move into, sorry, kidding. So, a little facilitator humor there. So it's a nice narrative. What I like to do is I like to, kind of whittle it back down a bit. So I can go from really verbose to a little bit shorter. Or if I want to present this to maybe a grade school class, kind of whittle it down so a first grader could understand what ChatGPT is. And when I'm looking at high-level technology, this is the mode that I want to go into as I learn stuff. Well, maybe I want to take ChatGPT a little bit of a step further from looking at narratives and essays. Maybe I'd like to actually create a presentation off of the information I'm actually harvesting. Because as an educator, nothing says education like building a PowerPoint presentation. And I labor over putting things together, and well, labor no more because I have endless presentation content material at my fingertips. So I can take and intuitively move this through copy paste to be able to build out some information and to do a presentation. I can take the same information and I can stop the generation because it's very much like my real world slides. It seems to go on forever and ever and ever. So maybe I don't want this slideshow right now. Maybe I'd like to generate a quiz. So I get a nice list of multiple guess or multiple choice questions. I actually get an answer key at the bottom. I can go through and maybe create a study guide. And all of a sudden it's wanting to talk about World War II. Somewhere we got a disconnect here, which is a great segue that as you start to work with ChatGPT, there may be points in time where it starts to lose context of what it's actually revolved around. Sean and I were talking a little bit about ChatGPT prior to the presentation. One of the things we came to agreement on among several was that just because ChatGPT generates information doesn't mean we should invest or go wholeheartedly in the information that's provided. As human beings and mere mortals, we still need to figure out what's valid data and what is invalid data. With ChatGPT, I can go beyond educational things and I can start to do list generation, such as suggesting, what I want to have for dinner. All right, so consider dietary needs, pantry, food stuff. Well, let's see. Let's try something a little different here. What can I make with flour, water, egg, and salt? So the quick response is make homemade pasta, not a very luxurious meal. So I can start to add ingredients and get ideas and suggestions. And maybe I don't want that chicken in there. Maybe I have a sudden epiphany that as I go through and look at queries. So I could go on endlessly with examples and illustration, but respect to Sean, I do have a time frame to work within, so I'm going to go ahead and take my rightful place back on the panel. And thank you for allowing me to intro ChatGPT to you.
All right, well, thank you for that introduction, Bill. That was fantastic. Now I'd like to begin with just a couple questions for Heather and maybe even Alec, who's done some things with this as a student as well. And yeah, so, and then maybe the others can weigh in after. So what do you all think?
What do I think? Think about, I think this is, I think Chat GPT and the AI is probably as pivotal as progressive education was when John Dewey decided that work, study, play was where we were going to go. I think this is monumental. I think this is the change that we need post-pandemic to move into a world that students, all students, and I consider myself a student as well, a learner consistently. I mean, it certainly blurs that teaching and learning cycle. I think it moves us to use knowledge in different ways that's far more productive for a traditional learner. It moves us to a skill-based sort of education system, a space where we begin to create, make, and do, and not have to worry so much about how we obtain that knowledge. That knowledge has been in a 5-year-old. Reason to come to school is sort of changing and pivoting. And we know that that's been important for job skill. It's not a renaissance anymore. It's what can I do with this information? How can it make me better? And how can I be more efficient at my work? But I do think this really puts us in a better space with the old school idea of a flipped classroom, which would be now more important than ever. The idea of coming to school for a lecture is just dead. I can get that on YouTube. And I don't need the knowledge of the professor the way I did in the past. So I'd leave it there and let somebody else tag on to that.
I will piggyback off that. And as Sean was saying, as you guys grew up and watched search engines, for instance, become much more powerful tools to obtain information, I see Chat GPT as now that search process, but on steroids. So I mean, like in engineering, at least, we have to get creative ways to solve problems. So a NASA project I was a part of, simply put, I had a Geiger counter and I didn't get any readings from it, but we did hear the little pulses, like the beep, beep, beep off the camera. So it worked. So I still wanted to obtain data, and I had faculty advise me of trying different things, and I wasn't getting anywhere. And I only had about a week to be able to extract this stuff. And so I just simply asked ChatGPT, like, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. And then it gave me a list of ideas. And then I went on my own and tried to explore the validity of those ideas. Like you said, as human beings, we still need to not take everything ChatGPT says at face value, but it streamlined that process to learn something much more quickly than just going and typing in, 50 different Google searches on how to do this very specific thing. Because when it comes to very specific stuff, ChatGPT as a model with its huge database can really hone in on what specifically you're trying to do. So creating lesson plans, study guides, or even just as a back and forth tutor to go, hey, I want to learn about history and literature or something. And it's just a very streamlined way to, as you said, be more productive and efficient. But integrating that into education is going to be, it's going to be a dicey road, because people can then also say, hey, this is my own work, but then turn it in, or, really it was ChatGPT that wrote the essay or wrote the code, you know what I mean? But I will say it's beneficial for, being highly or much more streamlined with obtaining information.
Sure. Then any other, Bill or Alisa, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll add on to that. I mean, I think it's just a more advanced version of AI that we already use. So like in my classes or in my discipline, composition, we're trying to teach students how to write better. And we always encourage them to use spell check, right? Well, that's an AI. Where there's a tool called Grammarly that looks at your writing as you write. And these things are just so built into the systems now that we don't even really think about them. And I think AI is just a more advanced version of that. And we, as instructors, are going to be responsible for teaching students how to utilize those tools, just like we tell them to spell check now. We'll teach them how to utilize these tools to improve their writing as well, and not necessarily to do the work for them, but to take their work, look at it, and make suggestions on how to make it better.
I'm seeing with ChatGPT, I think it's going to be one of the tools that's going to help in an area of my students that seems to be a challenge at times. And what I'm referring to is critical thinking. And I think the students that use ChatGPT for critical thinking are probably going to be learning more ChatGPT skills from one another through collaboration than perhaps through direct instruction. But I think it's going to be a definite help, at least in the areas that I'm seeing for technology and the engineering areas as well. And it's just going to really require that you have those critical thinking skills. And if you don't, again, I think it's going to be that tool that's going to help to bring them out.
Excellent. That was great responses. Yeah, and I think as a librarian, I'm also excited, like Alec mentioned, that drilling down to some of that really specific information as you go in. But now that we've kind of talked a little bit about some of the benefits, I also want to talk a bit about maybe some of the flip side. And perhaps maybe we'll start with Alisa, just because I know there's a lot of concerns, especially English folks, of people using ChatGPT essays. Although you talked about some of the benefits and some of that, the other end of that as well. But so what are some things though that you see as potential perils or things to be aware of when using this technology, or perhaps are you maybe not quite as concerned?
Well, I mean, I think the obvious is what Bill just showed us, write me an essay, and it writes the essay. But I also feel like that's happening already in different forms. And that's why we have turnitin.com, right? We've found solutions to sort of combat that. But I think the key to it really is that faculty have to be aware. I'm sure there are plenty of faculty on campus that might require students to write, that don't use the system built into Canvas, right? They just let students write whatever they want, and in whatever manner they grade it. And I think that it needs to be talked about in our classes as not just don't use ChatGPT, but here are some appropriate uses of it. Here are some inappropriate uses of it, and we're going to be checking. And I think that when I remember before plagiarism detection became a big thing that colleges paid for, I had a lot more students who would cheat, right? But now that the students are aware that it's just so easy, they can even see it as soon as they turn it in, what their turn it in score is. And I think that eliminated that, I don't know if it's a desire, but that need to cheat, right? And I think the same thing is going to happen with ChatGPT. Now, we're all seeing this rise because they don't think we know about it, right? They think that, we haven't figured it out yet. And it's true that there are many faculty on campus that haven't figured it out yet. And so those students are feeling sort of this, I got away with it this time, and I'm going to keep going until I get busted, so to speak. So I think that just that same general ChatGPT is going to do all the work for them. It's going to type in, everyone say they type in their quiz questions, and ChatGPT answers it beautifully. And so that's the fear of like, what do we do now?
Yeah.
Well, I would, this is scary stuff. Palpatine exists. This is Star Wars, right? This is going to fall into the evil hands of someone, right? And I mean, but they are talking about that. There's a pause right now on this, right? Industry standards are being put in place because like cloning of the 90s, what do you do with this technology once you find out it happens? I'll tag on to what I'm afraid of is our brain development and how we are going to adapt to this. But if I stop using my brain because GPT can do it, well, it atrophies, right? And as an educator, I'm keenly aware, and you're all talking about critical thinking skills. Absolutely, this brings us to a whole nother level of how do we collaborate in a classroom? How do we problem solve together? Lord knows that this generation before us is trying to figure out climate change, and ChatGPT isn't going to do that. It's going to give them some tools to explore some solutions. But if our students become to rely on all of this, I feel sorry for you. because your brain will go flat. And we know, and people are very afraid right now about human evolution and Chat GPT and other devices like it, as to what will happen as we evolve, and we will, as our social sciences talk to us all the time. The other thing that makes me a little wary is that Chat GPT is socialized by the same biases in our society as we are. There's no difference. So if you can't get into that deep fake and understand misinformation, well, this thing's going to amplify it 10 times. So now I need that critical thinking and that instructor in the classroom who's able to ask the posing questions, right? Who gets us deeper into that conversation is absolutely critical. But this is a weapon that could go very wrong for us if we don't get out in front of it, if we don't embrace it and understand where it's going. And there will always be evil in the world. I think we're honestly on that precipice of we're either going to go to the light or we're going to go to the dark, right? Think about the jobs that are going to be gone with this. Right? You think about software engineers and what's the point, right? Think about how much is going to evolve from this. And as educators, number I just read, 30% of students are already using this. 70% of teachers haven't even tried it, right? We're already in that dark vacuum hole. Tag, you're it.
I think one thing too is like, if you guys aren't familiar with technology S-curves, like adoption curves, it's like, it starts out slow and then it just exponentially grows and then eventually it'll level off. I don't know where we are on that curve with AI. And the reason why it's hard to tell is because I think it took Facebook and like other big technology applications this amount of time to hit 100 million users, but it took ChatGPT like a tenth of that. Like the whole world hopped onto artificial intelligence once it became more viable. And as you were saying, it's like, well, if it would be nice to know where we are on the adoption curve, because then we can know how far ahead we need to actually move ahead to be able to like integrate it. But yeah, I did not know that. I thought teachers were just on top of it with the students.
Perhaps
But-
we overestimate.
Yeah, well, okay. But another thing I'm a little worried about too is like the turn it in, like the plagiarism checkers. I actually messed with it as well because they're integrating AI detection stuff now. So like if you just copy and paste with Chat GPT, and you literally just turn it in as your own work, it has an AI detection like, hey, this is 60% AI written or blah blah blah. And you don't know how the algorithm's working. I guess you can kind of have an idea for like plagiarism checkers, like okay, it's scouring the internet for like this exact saying or something paraphrased from it. But with an AI language model, it's writing that on its own based on machine learning. And the Declaration of Independence, someone put it into an AI detector and it said it was 80%. Yeah. Okay. But there's the side that's like, okay, we want to make sure that students aren't submitting their work as their own and then like using these detectors, but it's also knowing like, okay, how valid is its detection when it says, okay, this is 70% written by A, but it's like, is it really though? How do you know that? How do you contact a company? Like, there's a lot of little in the weeds stuff you'd have to get involved in, but yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Two things I'll touch on would be the cheating or the plagiarism as well as the deep fake. And I think part of it is starting people that use technology or education in general at a young age with just some good skill set to determine what are good ethics that are accepted and which ones are not. I've been guilted all my life as a Catholic that if you cheat, the only one you cheat is yourself. So that would be like my golden rule for everyone. But another part of it is there was a 60-minute segment this last weekend that talked about AI, and the Google CEO is actually lobbying that the government get involved to put in regulations and really guardrails in place so that the discussion that we're having now is going to be tended to at a larger level. But as soon as I hear government regulation, it's for every give, there's going to be some take that comes along with it. But if the AI experts at big companies such as Google are saying this could really blow up and be a significant negative impact on society, I really perk up and I'm interested to see what can be done to safeguard that.
Yes, a lot of good responses. And something also just from an information perspective, ChatGPT has been really good at answering a lot of questions, but one of the things that I didn't hear mentioned that I always wanted to bring up too is often ChatGPT will also hallucinate information, is often called, where they'll just start making up facts, and they sound excellent and plausible. Actually, for this presentation, I asked ChatGPT to write 10 kind of headline catching, articles about, ChatGPT, give me like the links to them and tell me the titles and the headlines of the articles. And it gave me really great 10 articles. I clicked on the links to each and all led to dead links because it basically made up the articles themselves. So sometimes you have to deal with that where it makes up information or makes up articles, citations, things like that. So just another thing to also keep in mind. But at this time, though, I do also want to open up things to kind of audience questions. So if you're in person, feel free to raise your hand. We got Christina here that can, give you microphone power to your question. We also, if you are online, feel free to add some of your questions into the chat or the Q&A, and we'll try to answer some of those. And just to let you know, I'll probably repeat the question so the online audience can hear. Any questions so far? Or comments on ChatGPT?
Sean, I wouldn't mind adding, when we talked about the teaching and learning process here, but we haven't talked about system redesign in education. And I think the potential for system redesign is amazing. You think about the enrollment system here and we go with AI. We could get our students in within 15 minutes. And our advisors then become more of the career coaches that we need to make it more like expedited. Think about AI in school safety currently, and what they're using it for is to identify the shooter in a school within seconds so that our police officers can move into that space even faster, right? And I imagine that system would be on this campus in 2-2s. Even if they decide to create a gun out of plastic and assemble it where they're at, AI would have the ability to see that that is an instrument that shoots, and that school safety with AI can just become something. I mean, as much as I would rather see guns eradicated, it's not going to happen in this culture. So they're looking at using AI, right? Reasons. Think about tech here. I need tech support. I could punch in my number and I don't have to go through 3 tech tickets to get my system solved, right? So now my tech people can set up the systems that are required for constant updating while AI can get into my computer and figure out how that happens very quickly. Right? So think about the systems that AI in education, generally speaking, can help us with, which might expedite and make us so much more effective and efficient with students than as it stands right now with human folks that are stuck with bureaucracy and government. AI takes us to a whole different place when it comes to the systems that need to be designed in higher education and in K-12 education. We're talking about the personalized tutoring that's occurring with Khan Academy, who's put theirs out. I mean, they're seeing grade level jumps by 2 years in 6 months because it's targeted, personalized tutoring. I think there's places we can shoot the moon with this, but it doesn't necessarily threaten a job, so to speak, but make it so much better for us.
Well, it's almost like a lot of technology tools that have evolved over the decades that the knee-jerk reaction is we're going to displace people from employment, and instead it creates opportunities and it enhances a lot of the existing opportunities that are there. I think it's just the newness of tech that kind of puts us in a kind of a dinosaur mode. But all the things that you had mentioned in regards to technology and education are spot on. I struggle at times as a program director when a student contacts me and says, what jobs are in the programming area that I'm going to do well with, and to use ChatGPT to actually go out and build that list and use it as an insightful tool to create some dialogue and a narrative, it becomes a valuable resource.
Oh, so we do have an online question.
Does ChatGPT and AI reduce opportunities for serendipity when researching?
Does ChatGPT and AI reduce serendipity when researching? So finding maybe those things that you might not have thought to look for as you're doing research?
That's a good question.
Yes,
Yeah.
that happened many times. Because a Google search is only going to get you as far as like the keywords, but with artificial intelligence, if I can ask, well, what are there other ways or methods to solving this problem, or you can press it on its information that it obtained for you, and it will. I mean, any artificial intelligence is as good as large as databases. So I mean, if its database is as large as these modern artificial intelligence are, then it's going to have a plethora of the information at your fingertips, as we have with phones. But now you can press it, and as I totally agree, as personal tutors, the technology is going to do great. There's a lot of areas that's going to do great, but yeah, in regards to research, it definitely streamlines that process and gives you creative, because you can press it and it'll go outside of a Google search. So.
Yeah, but I'll add to that as well, but right now, I don't think it does a really good job with the research. I mean, it only grabs what it can find in that particular space or concept that you've asked in the question. And so when you start digging deeper, so, we try to encourage students to use more academic, sources for their papers. Now, a lot of those sources are hid behind, the paywall and so forth. So it's not going to grab those things. And then when it does, Sean mentions, it starts making up stuff. And so I'll start testing it and say, well, can you give me some citations in this essay that you just wrote? And it pops up these beautiful citations. And then the same thing, can you give me links, the full bibliography to this? And you'll notice that unless you, quiz it further, it will just give you very surface level sources. It's not digging deep into these academic sources. And when you keep asking for it, it makes it up. And the same thing, I had this beautifully written paper with AP citations, and I was like, wow. And then I was like, let me check on these. I started looking them up. None of them existed. None of them existed. So I was like, well, this will be easy to bust a student in. Just check their, citations. So
well, keep in mind too, it doesn't actually have access to the internet. So I believe its database ended in late 2021 or 22. So what it has is what it has, and links do change. But yeah, that is very true. A lot of scholarly articles are hidden behind a paywall, but that's what will be nice in terms of research though, is you can find the name and author of the person it's cited and then actually go read it, and then, find the proper citation. But yeah, you can't just take it at face value. I think that's a big thing to get across here, is you can't just take everything it says at face value, because it will lie to you very confidently.
Sounds fantastic and sounds very plausible what it does, though. It's a very good one, I think, for sure. We did have
Questions in the room before we go to online? Folks? Oh, excellent. I didn't have to stare you all down.
I have several questions and some comments. Let me start with a topic that came up just this weekend with my daughter, who's in college. She has a project due for one of her classes. She's an engineering student. And in a group, several people have to write part of it. So they're all supposed to write something. And so they all wrote something, and it was like 15 pages, but it's supposed to be 12 pages. So she was asking me, do you think it'd be okay if I put that in Chat GPT and have it, work it all together and cut it down to 12 pages? They kind of wrote it. I don't know. Do you think that's ethical?
yeah, I would say that that's one of the things that we want for students to do. We want them to take their own work and improve it and use the tool to help them improve it. So I wouldn't necessarily say that would be illegal or against the rules, because it is their work initially.
But it's it. I mean, but it's also, fixing all the grammar and spelling and all those mistakes.
Yeah, and that's what I was
stuff
talking about.
and redundancy and stuff like that.
I don't know any teacher today that will say this is not acceptable because you use plagiarism or you use
Grammarly.
spell check and
Yeah.
Grammarly to help improve your paper. So I mean, but I'm not saying that there aren't instructors out there that would do that.
Well, these are these gray areas that we're gonna
Yeah.
have as instructors all the time, as far as is that allowable. And, I'm sure there's gonna be multitude of sentences in there that are not from you know, they're authors, but from a ChatGPT. So you wonder, where's the line as far as what's acceptable and what's not?
I guess I would be that professor that I wouldn't see it as ethical. I teach programming classes. If a student were to create a large program and then go through a process of throwing it in the chat GPT and say, optimize my code, I would have a hard time with that because to me, that really short circuits that learning experience that I want the student to go in and have the struggles to figure out how do I boil and reduce this stuff down? And it's part of becoming a programmer, and it's part of moving into being a software engineer and being really, really skilled versus just getting it done.
It's
I
kind of
don't disagree with that.
a question too, kind of playing devil's advocate. So when students graduate from school, often they'll go into different jobs where they might actually have these AI tools available to them. Do you think it's also important to train students to maybe utilize these AI tools so they might be doing some of these types of things?
From the research I'm doing, if we don't, we're going to keep them poor and not employed. The efficiency of our work is so critical right now. Like, do you really think the CEO or their assistant is writing the memo anymore? They're not, right? The way they're going to use ChatGPT, that if we don't help these students learn how to use it, it's just going to hold them back. They see that this train is coming at us really fast. And if you think you're Wonder Woman or Superman and can stop it, go ahead, live in your cave.
Oh.
It's too late. And they're really talking about how this idea of, I don't, it's a lack of a better word than plagiarism, is really being pushed back by universities. And that idea is going to be very blurred in the next 2 to 3 years. That means.
Yeah, to come full circle, I think as a society, we're gonna have to draw that line ourselves eventually. Otherwise, you're gonna have loosely, defined lines all across the country, when it comes to turning stuff in. So, I mean, that's our idea of, I guess, plagiarism, for lack of a better word, but our idea of submitting something as our own that once began our own, but now kind of went through an AI filter. I don't have that answer, but I feel like as a society, we're going to have to come up with that anyways. Just like we did with, the internet. I mean, there's when new technology comes along, it's, as a society, we decide what's ethical and what's not.
I'll go back to the card catalog that we use and microfiche, right?
Well, I mean, piggyback on the comment you made about safety, wouldn't that require a loss of privacy? We'd have AI cameras,
surveillance
everywhere.
It's everywhere already. Have you driven back east? My son just got a ticket in Virginia. He nearly got it $50 later. Cameras are flashing everywhere. AI is being used everywhere.
But now we're talking about some kind of centralized monitoring.
More than likely.
Yeah,
If you want school safety and you want to see your kids live through K-12, how else are we going to do it?
So now we're gonna have cameras, they're talking to each other all over every place you go.
Well, one thing that they're talking about AI doing though for instruction is that we're going to be better at facilitating and managing humans in our classrooms, right? What's more important now is that once I start coming in to write the paper for you, I learn how to argue, I learn how to debate, I learn how to problem solve. I can do all that under the guise of the educator, the teacher. That's becoming our role. It's much more critical that we help students have those humanized conversations. That idea of culture of caring is coming out more and more, even in the medical industry where they're using AI like crazy, but they still need the doctor and the nurse with the person. So they're watching AI take us down that knowledge road, but the educator, specifically in this context, needed in the classroom to build that human capacity. Competency where students see that what they're learning applies directly to their economic outcome very shortly. That's a lot more motivating today than listening to someone draw on about I know Romeo and Juliet and what color tights he had on versus the impact of that gang structure in a police society. I don't know, making it up. But you know what I mean?
Making fun of mine.
Making fun, right? I taught language arts for a long time too. So I think it just switches us so much to what we can do in a classroom for deeper thinking and ideas and ethics. Like your daughter, that is a perfect way of AI working.
But it also gets to the issue of right now, AI, I clearly see it as a tool, but 10, 20 years from now, what job do we have that won't be replaced? I mean, why would we even need engineers or computer programs when AI can do all the work for us?
But
I
it
mean,
can't
we're
do the
trying-
human work.
What human work is there? I mean.
What we're doing right now,
Anything that can't be done, because AI, you gotta think about it's more intelligent than us, especially when it's designing itself. What is it that, is something that you can do that AI can't do in the future?
what we're doing right now is having a very human conversation. Look, a screen, we know there's Zoom fatigue and we know what happens when students and brains are on a screen flat all the time. It's not good for neuroscience in the brain. We know that. We're seeing students who aren't successful in online learning. You can only be on that screen for so long before your brain goes, I'm done, I'm out. You and I in this space right now, right, with a topic that motivates us, engages us, gets us to start thinking about multiple perspectives, AI makes that up. But you and I don't. We're in this space to have this conversation. And maybe it's going to bring students back to this space versus hiding behind their social media or being afraid to do anything because somebody's going to judge me for it. Instead, an educator is in the room, really facilitating these conversations that I think a lot of young adults are dying for, that they want this engagement so that they can write that paper and be more.
The question was how to, what are some like skills and ways to maximize your queries in Chat GPT to maximize your response?
You've discovered prompt engineering. So, sorry, I'll go on right away. So that was one thing I really dived into. And I even looked online, like what are different ways to prompt language models to get the various results you want. And because when you say write this paper but be concise, or you can say write this paper and be descriptive, it'll give you two pretty vastly different responses. And I think for me at least, when you say, hey, sometimes as you go through the chat, it's losing context. Well, you need to remind it like, hey, here's some background information from your previous response, and you copy and paste that response that it gave to you, let's say, 5 responses ago, and be like, then you work from there. And then another thing is when you tell it, explain your reasoning step by step, or like when it's writing code, like, hey, write comments on each section of code, like on each line or even like each section, and explain why you are giving me this answer. It does generate better, more valid responses, but I would say reminding it that of the context that you're working with, and then asking it to explain why it's doing what it's doing.
To me, it's taking that large context, the question you start out with, and then of the content that's given back, pulling out pieces of information and starting to funnel down into something more focused, more specific. That seems to have a better go of keeping things on the rails, so to speak, as you start to use Chat GPT.
I was just going to add that that's part of the challenge that we have as instructors, is thinking of ways to help students to better do the search. And it's, just like when you're trying to get them to search for sources for a paper, you have to teach them about, coming up with a keyword list. And it's the same thing. And utilizing what you found and piggybacking on those texts, pulling out keywords to further the search. It's the same concept, but it's going to be different for every class, just like with Tim's question, you know, the response, mine was definitely different than Bill's because of what we teach. And so each instructor has to really sit down and think about it, because if they want students to use it, they're going to have to help train them to use it appropriately, to be successful with it.
I also want to shout out the library. Like, that's what we do, is navigating language and information systems. Come talk to your friend librarian. Any other questions from the room before we go to chat?
Co-construct guidelines for both student and employees' use of these tools. I have some recent conversations, concerns about faculty using these tools to provide assignment feedback or write letters of recommendation.
Okay, yeah, so the question is, you know, how do we come up with guidelines between ourselves, as maybe faculty and staff and students, of how to utilize these tools?
I mean, you mentioned the letter of recommendation. I mean, we get a lot of those requests, and each letter is definitely personalized. But forever, I mean, I've been teaching for over 35 years. I've always had sort of this template. And to me, that's in a sense the same as if I were to ask GPT to write a letter of recommendation. I wouldn't then just give that to the student. I would then add in the personalized part of it. So, I mean, I'm looking at it from, is ChatGPT any different than this template that I've used? I really feel like as an instructor, we already have our own code of ethics, right? And as more as the more we learn about the tool, this new tool, then we have to integrate our code of ethics into that. So, I mean, I think there's not going to be any one set of rules for all of us. Like, we have to follow this in regards to ChatGPT. Like, you can't do this, and because you know how faculty are. Oh, you can't tell me what I can and cannot do, right? And so I think it's going to be up to us, just like, you know, we go into our classrooms every day and we teach what we teach, and no one really knows what that is, but we all hopefully are doing what we're supposed to be doing because of that code of ethics that we have.
I think, even though I'm not faculty or anything, but like having a rubric, like the teachers have to make the rubric, right? So if you can have a rubric that you lay down yourself that you think reflects the quality of the assignment that is being submitted, and you can give that information to the AI model, and so it understands the context of what you're working with, then yeah, I can see it as a tool, but I don't think you should, like, if it's a 0 out of 10 in terms of, let's say, readability, well, okay, what is a 0 for you and what's a 10 for ChatGPT? So, like, obviously you're the ones that are going to actually give the points, but I still think if you give ChatGPT a good rubric, so it has context, and then, you know, you have many things to grade, well, you can at least use it to streamline the process, but you're still the person that's assigning, you know, what you want out of that assignment in terms of the rubric. So I think you can use it in that sense, but as long as you have your, like you said, good guidelines to work within the framework.
And I think you bring up an excellent area that ChatGPT and the other AI chatbot mechanisms are a tool. Tools are used by humans. So that really becomes the definitive factor of what can I do and what should I not do, as ethics start to play a role with that. I'm director on campus in my area. I had an advisory meeting with a whole bunch of business and industry folks, and I suffer from, you know, blank page syndrome. How do I write these people a thank you letter? So I thought, ChatGPT is going to write my letter, and I put in write a thank you letter, and it came up with this wonderful formal letter. I said, make it a little bit less formal, and it did that. And then I thought, I just kind of feel dirty doing this. It's not the right thing. So copy, paste into Word, and I used that as a beginning and started to really manipulate and come up with my own letter. And then kind of reflecting back, it's really using ChatGPT as a tool. I take the same activity and I put it into Google Bard, and Google Bard scared me because Google Bard not only crafted a thank you letter, but it crafted a thank you letter for advisory council members in technology in the area of education. And in my query, I had never said anything about technology. I had never said anything about education. I said, write me a thank you letter for advisory members. And I don't know if Bard is going out and looking at email history, but it's pulling that data from somewhere because that had been the second query that I had in the Bard. But it just made me feel really, really scared about where's all this information coming from. But to me, it's a tool, and I use it to spring forward.
You know, I want to quickly add on to that. I did try ChatGPT to grade. I teach news writing, so I picked 4 essays that I wanted to, the long process, I won't explain that. But the key feature with that was that I didn't really trust it. It was close to what I would have done. But what it does is it gives this huge, long list of feedback and ways to improve it, which I don't have time to do as an instructor. If I'm grading all of this stuff, I do my best to give as much feedback as I can. I think I do give a lot, but it like tripled and quadrupled the amount of feedback that I was able to give. And students, it was funny because I just I never get a response when I grade. You know, I grade all the time, right? I never get, thank you for the feedback, never. And this one student was like, wow, thank you for all that. Wow, he was like blown away. And then I had to confess, well, I was just trying out ChatGPT. He thought it was amazing.
Well, I know we're just about at time, so I definitely want to thank all the panelists for being here. And I just figure I'd end with just one last question. That you had any final thoughts that you want to convey as far as ChatGPT and some of these revolutions and artificial intelligence and how they might impact education? So here, let you all, if you want to answer that.
Yeah, I think with ChatGPT running, costing about $700,000 a day to run, being very hardware intensive, but somewhat light in data requirements, I think it's going to push technology to really build bigger, faster, beefier tech. And I think that's only going to help to enhance and supplement education and the consumer market as we know it.
Well, I have the same or similar opinion to Dr. Frank, who did his research in machine learning and artificial intelligence. Short term, we have decisions to make and lines to draw, but long term, as artificial intelligence gets so powerful, it will be able to recreate itself and, you know, create other versions of itself. I mean, it's gonna be Pandora's box, and we're opening it right now. So I think as a society, we should become familiar with how AI works. Like that should be the standard. Like, okay, we all know how the internet works now. We all know how to operate computers. That should be the standard moving forward. So we can, I mean, AI is gonna jump ahead of us in leaps and bounds in the long term, if you think about it like that. But at least in the short term, we should have everyone understand artificial intelligence, just like when the internet came out. You know what I mean? But I'll end there.
Well, I think, and then it sort of takes us to the need, all that you said. It takes us back to the need for humanities. It takes us now more than ever to understand ethics, philosophy, right? Who we are in the world and where we're going in the world, not naming what I know. So I think this just opens up that we can go all down STEM we want, but without having that focus on humanities and understanding how we are together, then I think ChatGPT can run its course, and who knows which Death Star I will be on in the next 20 years. But I do think humanities right now is super important. Guided Pathways is probably really old at this moment in time.
Oh, yeah.
Dead serious. Guided Pathways was yesterday. So that's how fast this is coming at us.
I would just add that, you know, we can't be reactive. You know, we're all afraid of this new technology, and so we want to change. You know, oh, I'm gonna have to make World Wide Web thing. That's what he called it back then, right? And everyone was afraid and everyone was reactive. And look where we are now with that. So I think in 10 years, we'll be looking back at this, going, I can't believe we were so afraid of AI.
Well, again, I'd just like to give everybody a round of applause. Thank you again for being here. It's really great, fascinating conversation. Yeah, and so that's the conclusion of this event. Just a couple of quick things I want to point out. If you are signing up for extra credit in person, be sure to sign the sign-in sheet. There's also a sign-in sheet, I think, on the online version or a survey for that. So again, thanks for coming in, and we definitely appreciate you being here.
All right.